Hello and welcome back. You're watching this because you bought one of my grinders and I am extremely grateful. So first of all, thank you very much. You have my email. If there's anything I can help with at all, be sure to shoot me an email. This video is going to be a little bit of an introduction to the steel grinder so that when it arrives, and you may have your order arrive in separate pieces, some of it's been shipped from here, some of it's been shipped from the manufacturer in Australia, but when it arrives, you're going to have a pretty good idea how to set it up and how to start using it. So to get started, this is what it's going to look like, whether you got the EU model or the USA model. It all really looks the same. The only difference is the hole placement and such forth. So, pulling the grinder out of the box, you'll notice that there's a wheel that isn't attached. Take off the bubble wrap, and what you will also see is that we do not have the tensioning arm attached. So, the first little job is going to be removing this plastic and simply screwing this into this hole here. Simply. That look like a 6mm bolt? Nope. Okay, I'm going to just get an adjustable. So of course that is our tensioning arm. That tensions the belt. From here, we can go ahead and remove this. This is the standard work table, work rest. We can unwrap our drive wheel, and this is also where the difference between the EU and the US models come. In the drive wheel, you should find some bolts and some washers and a drive wheel. Funny that. The difference that I talked about a little earlier with the EU and the US models is obviously how it is that you mount the motor, because the EU motors and the US motors are different. There is, I'll add another link down below just so that you can't forget, there is at the bottom of the product page for the grinder, you're going to find links to motors and VFDs and a little bit of information there. And I will run you through it again as we go. This happens to be a 2 horsepower motor. Now, I would absolutely, wholeheartedly recommend 1.5 horsepower. I've never had any power issues with mine. At 1.5 horse, you won't either. But the only motor I happen to have hanging around was this 2 horsepower, but it happens to have the exact same mounting face. I don't need the feet on it because we're going to be mounting from the end, so we can simply unscrew the feet. Otherwise, it just looks weird having feet hanging around in midair for nothing. Just little tip, because I spent so much time in my life without a T-handled Allen key. Getting a set of Imperial and metric T-handle Allen keys has saved me so much time in the short 2 months that I've had these. Oh my goodness, these things are so much better than the standard L keys. Right, probably be wise to be doing this on a bench instead of having to kneel on the hard concrete floor. We're gonna go up onto a bench. On the EU motors, this is a 6mm bolt. Of course, we'll then tighten it from one diagonal to the next and back over. There we go. You'll also notice then that there is one bolt left. So that is for the drive wheel. Obviously, make sure you got a key on the drive wheel. Line that up with that little groove that's been milled in there. You can give it a few licks with a dead blow hammer, and it should bottom out at just the perfect spot. We can now take this last little screw, and that will screw into the end of the drive wheel, like so. And that right there is the basic setup. As you can see, you've got your mounting holes here. One thing to note, the motor will cover up a couple mounting holes, so it's not a bad idea to potentially get this mounted onto your bench before you go ahead and throw the motor on. Alternatively though, there is another option, which is a lot of you guys have bought the bench mount. Let me show you that. The great thing about this, though you've never seen me use it in my videos, because I have never gone to the effort of setting it up, which is really actually very stupid of me, because this is a really great addition. But this bench mount allows us to tilt the grinder through 90 degrees to turn it into a horizontal grinder. So not only in this little short clip are you going to learn how to set up your very own steel grinder, you're also going to learn how to not be a numpty with a knife. I got just completely careless there. I even sharpened the knife this morning. The little friction folder that I made, just super sharp. And I closed it on my finger. Rookie error. I've always wanted to try super gluing a cut closed. It's interesting how it coagulates with the blood. I don't think it worked. I think the blood's stopping it from I don't think it's gonna cure. Right, where's some duct tape? Okay, I don't know how to super glue a cut, so we're going to get back to the grinder with some duct tape, good old trusty duct tape. So this is a seriously cool addition. The bench mount will come with all the fixings you need, and the blood. I bled all over that. And so like that, grinder can turn sideways, and you can use it as a horizontal and a vertical grinder. Super duper useful setup. I'm pretty shocked I haven't set up in my own grinder in the grinding room, so I need to get to that, because this is great, and for those of you who got that, you're going to really enjoy it. That is the bench mount. So again, when it comes to motors, as I said on the page of the website, link in the description below so that you can see that little FAQ about motors. If you want to control the speed, highly recommend it. You're going to need a 3-phase motor and a variable frequency drive, a VFD, that takes a single-phase input to then send 3-phase with a variable frequency to your 3-phase motor. The links are all below for the different options. If you just want a single speed, you can do a single-phase motor just fine. But the key is that if you go for a single-phase motor to then eventually make it a variable frequency drive, be able to change the speed and adjust the speed, you're going to need to then switch that motor out for a 3-phase motor. So you could plan for your future desires to be able to control the speed, get the 3-phase motor, and then just kind of bite the bullet and get a VFD anyway. You're going to thank yourself for it when you get into making knives. It's so useful being able to turn down the speed, and you need to do that when you're using the small wheel attachments. And speaking of other attachments, let's talk a little bit about that. Obviously, this is your standard grinding platen right here, where you're doing most of your work. This is a steel platen. You've got 2 different sized wheels, and this steel platen comes into our aluminium tooling arm, which is good because you can loosen this here, this little handle right here, and you can turn this around and you get a whole manner of different options. You can use just the wheel, you can use the slack belt here, you can use this larger wheel, and of course the flat platen at any angle you choose. So it's super useful. So you can tighten that handle any way you choose, and it's super rigid. You shouldn't have it moving on you. One little thing to note though, just in case you're curious, I have found that if I'm trying to perfectly square this up, the force of applying a lot of tension here will tend to move this just a tiny, tiny smidge, just a few thou off a square. I'll preempt that by taking my square up to it and just tilting this just a couple thou forwards, so there's just a smidge of air at the bottom, so that when I crank it, it goes back to a perfect square. This is just a small little thing about it, which is really useful to have. Of course, putting on belts is super duper useful. This backed out is usually where it likes to be for the flat platen. Putting on the belt is as simple as laying it around the front, coming around to the back, pulling down on our tensioner, and just simply feeding that through. There we go. And this tensioner is going to give your belt the perfect amount of tension. If, for whatever reason, you want extra tension in the belt, I'll find I sometimes want to do that. When I turn the platen around, I use the slack belt, and I go, you know what, gee whiz, I actually want it to be a little bit tighter. I'll go ahead and I'll loosen the tooling arm. I'll relieve the tensioner there, pull the tooling arm out again, and then you can get a little bit of extra tightness in the belt, which can be useful depending on how slack you want your slack. Of course, it'll be a little bit looser, otherwise you hear the different pitch. And then when it comes to your standard grinding rest, that slits into one of the 3 tooling arms. You'll see that you have access to 3 tooling arm holes so that you can move things around however you see fit, wherever you need the things to be. You can tighten that up. In case this gets in the way, you can just simply take a screwdriver and tighten it to where it needs to be so it can still come in and out, but then boom, you can tighten it real quick. Bring that to where it needs to be, and then you've got yourself the grinding rest. Now of course, when you put that on, it's not necessarily going to be square. You've got to adjust your squareness from here. Now the other attachment is this. This is the universal tooling rest, and this is a real monster with a lot of versatility. That simply slides in, and you see that you have 3 areas of adjustment here. You can loosen this, you can come up and down, you can flip it around to go way up. You loosen this, you've got another up and down, so you can really have a huge amount of adjustment as well as the angle of the table itself. So it's super duper useful for a lot of stuff, especially whenever you're trying to make like say a fuller groove and you're using the small wheel attachments, which we will show you now. Small wheel attachments, these are the ones that I use in my grinder back through there in the grinding room. Super easy to put them in. You loosen this comes out, small wheels go in, and you can flip these around and go from one to the other. Again, the important thing with these is that you do slow them down, because the normal belt speed running on these wheels, you know, it's going to be fine for the bearings, but if you run that same belt speed on that little 1/4-inch wheel right there, you're going to find not only are you going to do some damage to the belt and end up with a belt that's exploding in your face a little bit sooner, but you're going to be spinning those bearings at such a faster RPM than they really should want to be spinning. You'll want to spin them slower so you got better control with the belt, because it is very aggressive using these small wheels. So you spin them slower so you got better control, so you don't damage the bearings, so you get the most life out of the tools. And of course, the 1/4-1/2-inch sits in just the same, just like that, just like the 1/3/4-inch small wheel attachment. So you'll notice when you put the belt on as normal, you won't have tension. You'll need to pull that out, lower the tensioning arm so that you can give it some tension and have it run out here. When you put a belt on, most of these attachments should track just fine from one to the other. It is very well made stuff, but if it's tracking off to one side, say like this, your tracking knob right here is going to allow you to control where that belt sits. Sometimes you want it off to one side, sometimes you want it off to the other side. That tracking wheel helps you out a lot. What I was talking about with the ultimate tool rest is just this. You can slide this up, adjust your angles, and set this to whatever height you need, and that works wonderfully when you're grinding the fullers in on a blade like you saw me do on the Scottish Claymore, because you can set that right so that smack bang in the middle is your small wheel attachment. You can do a little extra adjustment by tilting that small wheel attachment. I just want to drop in and say you're seeing a lot of flex in there as I'm applying pressure. That's because I actually did not tighten the grinder to the bench stand. In case you're wondering why it's moving around so much, it's just because those bolts were finger tight, so it's moving around. Okay, back to the video now that I've explained that. However you choose, but it really just gives you a whole lot of versatility. So for those of you that got that, that's how it gets used. Switching out the tools on this is really a breeze, and you're going to enjoy it. I've had such joy from using my one for the past kind of 9 or 10 months, and I do seriously love the thing. So we can put the normal platen back in, boom, just like that. We can put our belt back on. There we go, got tension in the belt. Adjust the tracking and you're good to go, you're good to grind. You want to flip the grinder to a horizontal grinder, boom. Just like that, you got a horizontal grinder. When it comes to wiring your motor, that's something that I can't give you advice on because I am not an electrician. I did wire mine and it did go fine. Your best bet is going to be consulting the manual that comes with your motor, consulting the manual that comes with your VFD, and then of course what I'm going to recommend, what I have to recommend, is that you get an electrician to wire them. A little top tip is you'll often find that the motor manufacturer, they have a helpline where you can call them up and say, hey, you know, I'm experiencing this or this issue, and they're going to be able to help you troubleshoot that, and they're experienced and qualified to be able to help you in that way. But again, you know, it's simple enough stuff, but I gotta recommend that you get a professional to do it, as I'm sure you can understand. That is how you get this bad boy set up. Be sure to email me if you've got any questions, info@alecsteeleblacksmith.com. I'd love to help. Thank you so much for getting your own one of these. I'm immensely grateful. Again, any questions whatsoever, bung me an email. I'd be really happy to help. Super duper grateful for your purchase. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next normal episode. So thanks for joining in here.